This is the story of my paternal grandparents. This is the story of my paternal grandparents. My paternal grandfather was Steve, and my paternal grandmother was Emma's. Her maiden name was, and even though she was called Emma, her actual name was Amelia, and I learned that from her daughter, who was my aunt. Anyway, they immigrated from Europe to the United States back in the early 1900s, I guess it was. My grandfather first came to Canada, and he settled in the western part of Canada and started to do farming. But from the stories I've been told, he didn't really like Western Canada, so he ended up moving back to Ontario, and that's where he, that's where he bought a farm and was farming. And then he asked for my grandmother and my father and his sister and another brother to come over from Europe, and they all settled in Ontario. However, my father, who was learning to be a cabinet maker slash carpenter, he came to the United States and became a citizen in the United States so that he could continue on with his training as a carpenter. But the rest of his family stayed back in Canada. Now, my grandparents lived on a farm in Ontario, Chatham, Ontario, and they raised chickens, they had some cows, some pigs, and they also planted tobacco. So it was pretty much a tobacco farm. I recall as a child going to the farm when the tobacco was harvested in I guess it was late summer, early fall, and they brought the tobacco in from the fields and brought it into the barn where it was dried. And I assume after that it was sold to whomever they sold it to. And my grandparents lived there for quite a few years, and we would visit them at their farm maybe 2 to 3 times a year. My grandmother was a very, very quiet kind of person. She spoke pretty good English, but mostly she spoke Hungarian. And my grandfather, he was the same way. He spoke a little bit of English and mostly Hungarian. Now, they were not from Hungary. They were probably from that area back in the 1900s, and maybe the language, the Hungarian language, was spoken, even though both of them, their ethnicity is German. And I don't know, I don't think they were born in Germany, but again, their descendants came from Germany or somewhere in that area of Europe. My grandmother loved to cook, as most grandmothers do, I guess, back then. And what she used to do was go out into the barnyard and grab a chicken and wring its neck and then make chicken soup for when we visited. And that's what we had for our lunch. Kind of yucky, but that's the way it went. And their house, when we were young, did not have any indoor plumbing. So we would make trips to an outhouse in the backyard when we had to go to the bathroom. And that was kind of unusual, but we did it. We had to do it if you wanted to go to the bathroom. She got sick probably in her early to mid 50s. And as we later learned, she had stomach cancer and eventually died from the stomach cancer in her mid 50s. Now, my grandfather, he just lived to be elderly. I'm not sure if he was in his 70s or 80s, but after a bit of time, he was not able to keep up the farm. His family moved him from the farm and sold the farm. And I'm not sure if he ended up in a nursing home, but he died when he was in his probably late 70s, early 80s. And that's all I know about my paternal grandparents.